Morning, it's Corrine. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about compatibility for INFJs and maybe for INFPs. INFPs can always comment to give me their thoughts on this. But I've been watching some videos, and one thing that's really bothering me is that, this belief that somehow the ESTJ is a good match for the INFJ, and I would really, really question that. Having an ESTJ mother and having so many issues with the SJs, I just can't imagine how anybody would choose an SJ as a life partner. Now, if there are, people out there who are INFJs and they have, or INFPs and they have SJ long-term partners and it works out, then, that's wonderful. I think it's great if it does work out. But my feeling is if you hadn't, so SJs are about, they're the largest population. They're about 40% of the population. And NFs are one of the more, smaller parts of the population. They're only about 14%. The only one smaller, I guess, is the NTs, which is like 12.5%. And then the SPs are somewhere around, 33%, something like that. So if you date an SJ, I can't imagine how it would work out without feeling, in some way persecuted or emotionally abused. And I don't mean to be too hard on that. I just feel like there would be a lot of criticism from the SJ towards the NF, because I believe SJs have a very hard time, understanding the NF, and also that, there's strength in numbers with the SJ, so they believe they're right, they feel they're right. And even though an SJ might help an NF from, dreaming so much, and it might help them with the real world a little bit more, I feel like it would really hurt the NF's self-esteem most of the time, because they would feel like the way they are is not okay. So I don't know. I would really, really question whether SJ is a good compatibility. Although, if you're out there and you have an SJ partner, that's wonderful. And it's certainly not impossible. I mean, my theory is that the best people for the NF is actually other NFs, if you can find them. I mean, I think NFs do manage to find each other, even though they're small parts of the population. I think if I were, at a gathering of some sort, and if I felt like somebody was an SJ, I'd probably keep my distance from that person, and I would probably gravitate more towards the NFs, or people that I would feel are NFs. And I don't mean to say anything bad about SJs. I just feel like being in the SJ presence is a little bit hard for the NF, because sometimes, it makes them feel like they're not, like there's something wrong if they're an NF. So, and I really think the best type for an INFJ is probably the ENFP. I have had, quite a few male platonic friends over the years that were ENFPs, and those are really amazing relationships. They're able to come into my inner circle. I feel good in their presence. They understand me. They're willing to listen to me. We can have great conversations. And I basically feel like with NFs, so any of the INFs, of the introverted NFs, can probably be really well compatible with the ENFs. So, and I don't think it really matters whether it's ENFJ and INFP, or ENFP and INFJ. So, I think they all could work together. I think the problem, like, for example, I have an INFP husband. I think And it's fine, and I love him, and we're certainly going to go for the long term. But I think some of the problem with the I is sort of the blind leading the blind into the real world. I think the E's feel a lot more comfortable in the real world. Certainly an INFJ INFP relationship. It seems to me, and INFPs correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that the INFJ sort of has one foot in the real world, although wants to be, for the most part, in their own world, in their mind. Whereas I think the INFP lives more in their mind. I think the real world is probably harder for the INFP than the INFJ, although the INFJ has a lot of stress dealing with the real world. So if you're an INFJ and INFP relationship, it puts a lot of pressure on the INFJ to make things happen in the real world, because it's hard to get the INFP motivated. Although, that doesn't mean that the INFP isn't perfect exactly the way they are, because what attracted me to an INFP is just their incredible gentle soul. And after growing up with SJs, that's what I needed more than anything. I needed somebody there to just sit and listen and understand and love me just the way I am. And that's the greatest things that INFPs do. They love you exactly the way you are. They don't really expect you to change or to do things. And so INFPs are so necessary to the world. They really, really are. Although I think they probably have the biggest challenges with working within the real world. And it's interesting because, as an INFJ, my lists have lists. I need to have lists in order to organize my thoughts in order to deal with the real world. And when I try to get my husband to do lists, he won't do them. And I'm starting to realize, whoa, that's an INFP thing, because I was watching videos of these other, INFP males and how they say that they just don't do lists. They just kind of go along with life. And I think that's how my husband is. My husband, I can gently remind him to do one thing a day, and then he'll get it done. And I think the less I push him, the more the healthier he is, and the more happier he is. So I think it's, okay. Although, so you can have a good, INFJ, INFP relationship. Although I think, if you're single and you're looking for someone, probably the ENFs are a little bit better in the sense that it takes off the pressure of the I in dealing with the real world. And additionally, I think with the EI relationship, the I's like to stay in. They like to stay in, they like to isolate, they like to read, they like to, be within themselves. The E's like to go out, like to have fun, like to deal with, interact with the real world. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's good for an I. An I just assumes they're not going to have fun if they go out. But sometimes if an ENFP can get an INFJ or an INFP to go out and have fun, afterwards they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, that was kind of fun to go out and interact. So, even though they can't do it every night, I think, sometimes, I think that's a pretty good relationship. As far as SPs are concerned, I think the issue with the SP, I have SPs in my life, and, they'd love to have fun, so you can have fun sometimes with an SP, but I think as a long term, I think it's kind of hard to deal with an SP because they're not as deep. They don't really deal with the thinking world or the world of your mind. They just want to deal with the sensation of the real world. So it's really hard to have a deep conversation with an SP, and I think that's so necessary for the NF that I think it would be, challenging to have, a long term. I think you can have friends who are in SPs and you can have fun with SPs from time to time, but I think you have to kind of jump back from SPs a little bit. As far as NTs, I can't really, unfortunately, comment too much on that because I don't know too many NTs. Although, from what I'm reading, it says they don't have a whole lot of emotion, and which I think would be, Maybe I think that might be a little difficult for the NF to understand if somebody doesn't have a whole lot of emotion. So I don't know. I guess I just can't comment on that. I don't know if those would work or not. But anyway, that's just what I wanted to say. I think if you're a INFJ or an INFP, I think you're most compatible with an ENFJ or an ENFP. So I'll leave it there. Have a great day. Love you. Bye.